I know it's getting late tonight, folks, but there is some breaking news. Now, if any of you were watching the live that was being done by Jennifer Hammonds, I was there. She was talking about some things regarding the Fitzgerald and McCain, and so I was listening, but as I was doing so, I was watching the wires, and a couple of hours ago, the Miami Herald broke a story about the 3 Marines that we've talked about at length that, about this time last year, were drugged and robbed in Bogota, Colombia. Now, the story at the time was that they went into areas they weren't supposed to be in, and they were drinking with prostitutes and got basically slipped Mickey, and they got robbed, and it was very embarrassing, and that they were more than likely going to be unceremoniously drummed out of the Marine Corps, conduct unbecoming an officer. Now, this wouldn't have been the first time that's happened with servicemen of any stripe, Marine, Army, Air Force, whatever. And here, in the initial story, I just want to read you a quote. We'll start up here. The report recommended that Marine Colonel Roger T. McDuffie, a Harrier pilot who serves as the Chief of Operations at the unit known as Marfor South, Major Andrew L. Mueller, described as Theater Security Cooperation Planner, and Major Mauricio Sáenz, Exercise Planner, face appropriate, administrative, or judicial proceedings. That means they could be charged with conduct unbecoming an officer at the very least. Marine Colonel Michael Farrell, the Marfor South Chief of Staff, wrote the report for Marine Brigadier General Kevin Iams, who was the commander at the time of the episode, but left the decision on what action to take to Marine Major General David Bellin, who replaced Iams on Monday. And here was the story. The trio ventured into a working-class section of Bogota that is off limits to Pentagon personnel, violated a 1 a.m. curfew, and brought 4 women back to their hotel rooms. The Marines had earlier held a business conference at the hotel, according to Farrell's report. Now, I thought this was initially very strange, too, that they would have 3 Marines and 4 women. Because, well, it's just math. At least 2 of the officers blacked out in their rooms, apparently in the company of 2 local women, while another officer drew cash advances off his U.S. government travel card and brought 2 prostitutes to his room. According to the report, some of the February 3rd to 4th activity was captured on hotel security cameras. The 3 officers walked 4 women through the hotel lobby at 4:30 a.m. past fellow Marine officers who were mustering for a van ride to the airport at the end of the conference. The investigation noted that they were briefed, and you can read this article, but the point here that we're getting at is they were saying that they were behaving inappropriately, that they were out past curfew of their own volition, that they had sought the company of prostitutes, which you can't do as a Marine. It's just, it happens, but it's a violation. And plus, they're married, and in the military, you're not supposed to be cheating on your spouse either way. Now, however, the story has changed completely, and these men have been exonerated. Now, one is being forced to retire. One is being kept in the Marines with nothing happening, and another one is just resigning of his own volition. A military board has recommended forced retirement for a Marine colonel who was slipped a tranquilizer during a night on the town in Bogota, robbed and led around like a zombie before winding up in a Colombian hospital along with 2 other drugged Marine officers. Colonel Roger T. McDuffie, Harrier pilot, who was the most senior Marine in a South Florida unit on January 21st to February 4th, 2017, field trip to the Colombian capital to map out U.S. Marine operations there. Now, folks, I want you to think about this for a minute. They were there to map out U.S. Marine operations in Bogota, Colombia. If what I'm saying about the canal and military intervention in this area isn't coming, why would there be Marine units and commanders mapping out operations in Bogota? An initial internal investigation conducted by the U.S. Southern Command Marine Affiliate found some Marines broke curfew, ventured into a forbidden zone, consorted with prostitutes, and brought some back to their hotel, only to be robbed of government property and hospitalized. Now, here's where it gets interesting. A board of inquiry, an administrative procedure less serious than a court-martial, considered the case January 11 at Camp Lejeune and found that McDuffie was guilty of substandard performance and failure to demonstrate acceptable qualities of leadership required of an officer in the member's grade, said Gina Levy of the U.S. Marine Corps. The board recommended involuntary retirement in grade. That means he's keeping his money. She said, adding that a final determination of his case will be made by the Secretary of the Navy, Richard V. Spencer, 7681 Marine helicopter pilot. 3 generals sat on McDuffie's board. The larger group of Marines started their night with drinks at home of a Marine attaché assigned to the U.S. Embassy. According to an internal investigation obtained by the Miami Herald, they moved on to the Ugly American Bar and Grill, a bar popular with embassy workers for its hamburgers, and then hit the Colombian pub. McDuffie's attorney, Aaron Meyer, however, described the colonel as vindicated by the board. Meyer said he presented evidence to the board that showed the colonel was drugged while socializing in an approved bar, the Colombian pub, in an area where the U.S. military was allowed to go in a night on the town long before the curfew. At the hearing, he told the panel of general officers it was as though the colonel was in a sort of zombie-like state. Meyer said they were preyed upon by women, not prostitutes, from a gang that used spotters to target victims, drug them, watch them, glom onto them when they are susceptible, and ultimately rob them. The lawyer said he called the chief toxicologist from the Armed Forces Medical Examiner's Office to explain to the panel the severe and universal effects of benzodiazepine poisoning. Once you're drugged, all bets are off. You are completely susceptible and malleable. And here's the key. There was zero intent to violate any governing orders, binge drink, or carouse with the women. Colonel McDuffie, as a senior Marine present, failed in his broader duty to set the conditions that might have prevented such a drugging. They're saying that, well, I guess it was his job not to go out for a good time. And here again, essentially a Marine officer is responsible for everything that happens or fails to happen under his charge. And thus, in this case, despite the fact finders affirmatively finding that there was zero intentional or knowing misconduct, as previously claimed, Colonel McDuffie will be forced to retire. A separate board examined the case of Marine Major Andrew Mueller, described as Theater Security Cooperation Planner during his time at Southcom. Levy said the panel substantiated misconduct and found Mueller violate Article 92 of the Uniform Code of Military Justice, covering dereliction of duty, but recommended retention and the case be closed. So nothing's being done to this guy. And the Secretary of Navy will, of course, have the final say. The third guy, Levy said another Marine major implicated in the episode, Mauricio Sands, was scheduled to have his board at Parris Island last week. Instead, he chose to quit the service without a hearing on whether he should be allowed to keep his commission. Now, this was the guy I was kind of suspicious of because he wasn't drugged in the report. He was still downstairs. He never went upstairs, and he was down drinking with these women. And we've tied him into the Philippines. So that's the story. So they're not prostitutes. They are gang members and working with gang members. Now, we've covered this. Hezbollah has infiltrated the FARC, the ELN, the AGC, the Arabeños, all of these gangs that move through and around Venezuela and Colombia. And I'll say it again, if the U.S. was really not pondering the fact that we might have to be fighting a war pretty soon in that area, why last year, right after the current president took office, would we have been sending high-level Marine Corps attachés and officers to map out Colombia for operations? While everybody was talking about, and pardon my computer here while I'm talking, while everybody was talking about Hillary Clinton and the memo and lock her up and all this crap and the post-election stuff, they weren't really paying attention to what the president was actually doing. In his first 2 weeks, one of the first things he did was seize all of Tariq al-Aissami's assets in Florida. That's the vice president of Venezuela. Almost $500 million worth. It was on his very high up list of things to do. He did that before he did the travel ban. And here's Bogota, right here. Last year, we had Marfor South and the Marines in Bogota. What was their mission? Map out the region for operations. And what happened? They were targeted by gang members known to have been infiltrated by Hezbollah. And then, strangely enough, they lose iPhones, they lose iPads, they are incommunicado for 12 hours and zombies. During that time, I said it before, the breach of security cannot be overstated. The amount of information that could have been gleaned from those two officers about naval operations, Marine Corps operations, how things work on ships, I mean, it's beyond anything that could be imagined in 12 hours. What Hezbollah could have done with passwords and biometrics of a colonel and a major at that level. If you don't think Panama's in the sights, kids, I don't know how many more things I can say about it. And this story proves it. Even the Navy knows. The Marines know. They basically said they got these guys for as little as they possibly could get them for. One guy is being forced to retire, but he's going to stay in his grade and get all of his money. The other guy is getting a little tiny piece of paper put in his file, and he's going to be staying in the Marines. And the third one, who had the most suspicious behavior of all three of them, decided he was just going to walk before anybody looked too much farther into it. So that's why we're here, folks. You look at things, you investigate things. Maybe they have something to do with it, maybe they don't, but in this case, absolutely, it's had something to do with it. It's had something to do with both investigations that we've covered. The threat to Panama, the threat to Costa Rica, and perhaps intelligence that could have been gleaned that was used to compromise the Fitzgerald and the McCain. I'll leave it there. Thank you, everyone. Thank you to Jennifer Hammonds, again, for bringing this up and bringing this to the forefront and keeping this in the public eye and keeping focus on the fact that we're being lied to. Something is going on, and America's under threat. And we have sailors that are dead, that are never coming home, whose families deserve answers. And if something's going down on the southern border, this far down, we need to know. They take the canal, they could basically create two navies, our West Coast Navy and our East Coast Navy. They could, shutting off American access or U.S. access, or holding the U.S. hostage for other considerations by making other ships going through the canal more important than U.S. ships. There could be a million things that could be done if they seize that canal. And I can't imagine any other reason why the Marines would be mapping out Bogota for operations a year ago. So, anyway, also everyone pray for James Munder. Completely gone, completely off the map, literally one day after talking about our issues here. Talking about the issue with Fitzgerald and McCain. Talking about the issues in Central America. Some guy shows up, hacks his stuff, burns his computer down, and now he's gone. Pray for him. Got 2 channels and no action on either one, so thank you again, Jenny Hammonds. Really appreciate it. And like, share, subscribe, and we will see you next time. Thank you.